Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reasa Currier. I'm the director of the Department of Animal Services for Fairfax County. We have 2 open admission shelters in the county and also offer a lot of other community-facing programs. You can learn more about us at fairfaxcounty.gov/animal shelter. We are very excited today to be joined by Dr. Amy Pike. She is the co-owner of two animal behavior wellness centers, and their locations are in Fairfax, so right down the road from our West Ox campus, and also she has a location in Richmond, Virginia. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that we do have a Q&A. And so feel free to go ahead and enter any questions that you have into the Q&A, and we will do our best to get to those as we move through this interview. So welcome, Dr. Pike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
So can you share a little bit about your journey and what inspired you to develop a veterinary practice that's focused on comprehensive pet wellness, so supporting both the physical and behavioral health of animals?
Yeah, so after veterinary school, I actually entered the Army as an Army veterinarian, and this was a long time ago. It was the first wave of deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and so several of my dogs came back with signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, or what we now know is post-traumatic stress disorder in dogs. And we had a veterinary behaviorist in the military that was assigned to the dog center, and we sent those dogs off, and Dr. Burkhart prescribed Prozac and a behavior modification plan, and just seeing those dogs really thrive and sort of get back to better emotional health was amazing. And so then I decided to do a residency eventually in behavior medicine. And the reason I opened the practice in Virginia is because it is behavior and medical wellness are very, very intimately connected. And so, if a patient is in pain, whether that be osteoarthritis pain or GI pain or dermatologic disease pain, they are absolutely going to change their behavior, not for the positive. And so as a veterinarian, that's where, we are key in the diagnosis and treatment of behavioral disorders, because we can also rule out medical concerns. And so, my team consists of myself and 3 other doctors who are all in their residencies to become veterinary behaviorists themselves. And we have 5 trainers, veterinary assistants. So we have a whole complement of staff to really help treat the entire pet.
That's amazing. So you treat all different pets, correct?
All different pets, yeah.
Cats.
Dogs, cats. We will take ferrets, birds, rabbits, any companion animal.
That's awesome. So can you explain the difference between a veterinary behaviorist versus other pet professionals, such as a general veterinarian or certified trainer or an applied behaviorist?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of your primary care, your family veterinarian, as good for screening things, right? They are good at diagnosing and trying to figure out, is there a problem here? They're kind of your first line of defense when there is some sort of concern. And again, whether that be medical or behavioral. But then once it gets beyond their expertise, that's where a veterinary behaviorist and potentially a trainer and a PhD applied animal behaviorist can come into play. And so, just like there are veterinary cardiologists, there are veterinary neurologists, those specialties exist because your general family vet cannot do it all. The specialists go to an additional 3 to 5 years of training to learn their specialty. And that's, again, just kind of beyond what your general practitioner is primed and their knowledge level. So the difference between a veterinary behaviorist and a PhD applied animal behaviorist is that veterinarians can diagnose, treat, and prescribe. And so while an applied animal behaviorist can absolutely come sort of do a full treatment plan for a pet. The only thing that they can't do is rule out medical issues if the primary vet has missed something, or prescribe medication for that animal, which is what a veterinary behaviorist can do, being that we are primarily veterinarians. And then a trainer is kind of like, I'd equate them to like the therapist in the human world. So you've got your psychiatrists, your psychologists. I think the psychiatrists are like veterinary behaviorists. Psychologists are like our PhD cabs. And then your trainers are therapists. And so they're going to do the real hands-on work of behavior modification and training, although I'm the one prescribing the plan and determining what that plan might be.
That's incredible. And I think it's such an evolving field, and
it is
from where we were just, even a decade ago. And I know the cornerstone of your practice is really starting with the physical wellness. So, looking at that, doing the diagnostics to see if that's shaping the behavior. And that's also what we do at the shelter, right? Is this animal suffering or in pain? And how do we look at that first and sort that out before we start looking into a treatment plan? So today we're going to be talking about dog behavior, and I wish this was like a 3-part series, because there's so much that we could cover with you, because
Absolutely.
I also think like small animal behavior, like rabbits, and there's just so much that they're amazing creatures, and there's so much that we could dig into about those animals and how they communicate their needs with us through their behavior. So we're going to stick to dogs today, no matter how hard it will be. So I recently read an interesting article in the Atlantic. For centuries, historically, dogs were working animals, and so their behaviors like barking at strangers or chasing away creatures were considered highly valued by humans. And now, of course, the landscape for dogs is very different. Most dogs live indoors. They sleep in our beds. They hang out on our sofa. And they're expected to be content in this mostly sedentary indoor lifestyle. So how has this shift affected dogs overall?
Yeah, I think there are some positive things associated with that shift, but there's also some negatives. The positives being that we do treat our pets like family, and so we're much more apt to care for that animal for their life, much more apt to seek high quality medical care for them and really incorporate them into our full lifestyle. The hard part about that is they are ultimately still dogs at the end of the day, and they do dog things. And so, while my lifestyle is such that I can, have terriers, I have a little mini schnauzer here in my lap that you guys can't see on camera, but they chase after rodents. They kill things in my backyard. We have chickens, and we have to keep that chicken coop terrier proof. There's various things that we have to do in order to incorporate them into our lifestyle that many people would find, not ideal for owning a pet, right? Like if they have a rabbit, probably shouldn't own a terrier, because an indoor rabbit is going to be just another little prey item for them. When dogs dig in the garden, right, that's a natural behavior that they want to do. It's annoying for us because they're digging up our plants and our tomatoes and stuff we've worked really hard to grow. But ultimately, that's a very normal behavior. So like all of these things that we I guess sort of take for granted of these dogs are just going to be okay in our sedentary lifestyles, in our apartments, with me going to work, 9 to 5 or longer, and them without a companion, that can be hard on some animals for sure.
So speaking of those behaviors, right? So we often have people come to us, complaining and concerned about their dog and labeling them as having behavioral issues. And what they're describing to us is really just the dog is being a dog, right? They're digging, they're barking, they're chewing. But of course, those behaviors can really be nuisance behaviors for people that affect their ability to live peacefully and happily with their pets. So how do you approach that? And what is your treatment plan and options you provide for people?
Yeah, so the first is, if they are willing to work through this, then we want to provide that animal for an alternate behavior that is acceptable to the owner, but also satisfies the need for the dog. So, like a dog that's digging in the garden, I might actually tell them to create what we call a dig box, which is essentially
Hmm.
a sandbox for the dog, and we bury
Yeah.
bones in there, we bury toys in there, so they can satisfy that innate need to dig. If the dog likes to bark, we're going to manage that by trying to, maybe block cover windows, have them avoid whatever the trigger is. If it's, a dog that's reactive on leash, that towards other dogs kind of thing. And so we have to really provide for natural opportunities for that pet. So again, to kind of satisfy their innate needs, but we also need to make sure that this is the right fit in that home. And sometimes there is a mismatch, right? Like
Yeah.
they went into it thinking I was going to have this border collie in my apartment,
Yes.
and it all sounds wonderful, but ultimately the dog would benefit better, and the owner would benefit better by not being together. And that's one thing that we also educate owners on is it's okay to say this is not a good fit.
Yes.
The little guy
Yes.
in my lap is actually, he got to me because my clients ultimately decided, thankfully, that this wasn't the right dog for their lifestyle. They had lots of visitors and they couldn't handle his aggression towards, people coming into the house. I'm a big introvert. We don't have a lot of visitors, so he fit much better into our lifestyle. So, we just have to kind of understand and come at it from a level of understanding that it's okay to say, I'm not the right home for this animal.
And that's so important, and we definitely see that a lot. We see a lot of working breeds come into the
Mhm,
shelter, and I think they were not, they want a job to do, and their
mhm.
job, if they don't have a job, then they make their job.
Make their
They
own,
find a
yeah.
job. They find a job, and it
Yeah,
may be eating the sofa, or,
yeah,
or howling, or,
yeah.
and I just, it's unfortunate because those dogs were never set up to
Yes,
succeed. Like when we
yeah.
see the Malinois come in, or the herding breeds,
Right,
or dogs that really they're just incredible animals, but
mhm,
they may not thrive,
right,
living in a one bedroom apartment.
right.
Um, so, but speaking of breed, we often get people that come to the shelter, and they say, they've done some online research and they're
Mhm,
looking for a very specific breed.
mhm,
And they're a little disappointed when we sit down with them and say, okay, we understand you're looking for this breed, but we really want
mhm.
to know what personality or traits you are wanting. That may be
Right,
why you want this breed, or tell us a little bit about your family and your
right.
activity level, because we've seen that, there are some characteristics related to breed, of course, but in
Mhm.
large part we find dogs are kind of their own individuals,
Yeah,
despite
totally.
breed. So how are
Yeah.
you, I mean, how do you find dogs regardless of breed are
Mhm.
individuals, or are there certain traits that you do see?
Yeah, no, we always say that behavior is an N of study of one, basically. And
Mm,
so, we do treat the individual, but there are some behavioral characteristics or trends for breeds, especially in how they manifest their fear, anxiety, or stress. So, like a little poodle, if they're stressed, they oftentimes just shiver and cower, like a little chihuahua, right? Like that's their breed trend. Doesn't always happen. I treat several very aggressive, fear aggressive poodles
mhm,
out there, but
mhm.
whereas I also have giant schnauzers. So my giant schnauzer, they're guard dogs, and ultimately they are going to try and take care of their stress or fear or whatever's stressing them
Yeah.
out, rather. And so while there are those trends, again, ultimately it's the animal that's in front of me that I'm treating, and what breed they are doesn't really matter in the end. Now, I will say that there are some breed or group categories like herding dogs or hunting dogs that actually it does matter when it comes to psychotropic medication. So like
Yeah.
when we prescribe psych meds, there are some trends towards which breeds respond favorably to which meds. But again, ultimately it's up to that individual's brain. And so what I might choose for this dog, because it is a Rottweiler, ultimately it's up to that little brain what they decide works for them or not. And so we might have to switch it up based on their response. So
Okay. So I know you all focus on positive reinforcement
mhm,
training. Could you
yeah.
talk a little bit about that style of training?
Yeah, so positive reinforcement is using a reward to get the behavior that you want out of the animal. So, if my dog is lunging and barking at other dogs on leash, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reward the behavior of when they're not lunging and barking at other dogs on leash. What we don't want to do is aversive techniques. So we're talking about what's called positive punishment or negative reinforcement. Those are two very aversive techniques, and those rely on forceful, things that actually could be painful to the animal. So shock collars, prong collars, leash pops, yelling, spanking, hitting, etc. Those things induce fear, anxiety, and stress in the learner, and the learner being, let's say, our little dog here. So what I don't want to do is scare my best friend, right, into complying with what I want them to do. So punishment absolutely does work. People wouldn't do it and people wouldn't employ it if it didn't, but it's why it works that is key. And I would never ever want to cause another being, whether it be a dog, a cat, or my own children, to fear me, and that's why they actually behave. What I want them to do is want to behave because the consequences are really positive when they do. So I always say, like, if chicken rains from the sky every time, you see another dog, aren't you going to want to see
Right.
another dog? Chicken
That's right.
comes, right? So, I mean, that's very oversimplified, but it's so much kinder to our animals, and again, to our best friends that they're supposed to be, to train that way.
And it seems like the the reactivity, like you talked about,
Hmm.
is something that we see members of our community really struggling with, right? They want to
Yeah,
just go out and enjoy a nice walk with their dog,
yeah,
and it's like the dog is just, barking at other
yeah,
dogs, strangers. And so I know positive reinforcement training also takes patience, and
yeah.
so it's not linear, right?
No,
You
exactly.
kind of you move forward and back, and
Hmm.
so how do you coach people through that? That this isn't an instant fix, and I think some people
Yeah.
maybe gravitate towards those kind of other methods when
Hmm.
they feel a little exhausted.
No, absolutely. And I know most people don't want to, do those techniques on their pet, but they do
Yeah.
feel like I have no other option. So it is a process. Behavior change takes time, just like with us. We don't go to one session of therapy and expect to be cured of our anxiety disorder. We don't go to one session of therapy and expect
Hmm.
to all of a sudden love your mother that you've had a terrible relationship for 40 years, right? Like that's not how that works. And when you put into those human terms, I think that people are like, oh, now I get it, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and behavior is very much a roller coaster. Sometimes it's an upward, hill that we're climbing, and sometimes it's like, ooh, no, we're going downhill, right? But our hope is that it's always at least two steps forward, one, maybe one or a half step back, because that's just how behavior works. You didn't purchase or adopt a robot. And
Yeah.
so, these are emotional beings that have thoughts, feelings, frustrations, etc. And depending on the day, things might be worse for them because, again, oftentimes medical issues, right? I'm have a tummy ache, and so I'm more irritable. So I'm going to bark and lunge at more dogs that day than say tomorrow when my stomach doesn't hurt, right? So we just have to understand that our animals are ultimately just trying to communicate with us, and we want to help them as best as we can.
So we still are seeing the effects from COVID, as I'm sure you all
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah,
And we all
absolutely.
saw the headlines where everyone got a dog during
Yeah,
COVID, and
yeah,
which is amazing. Like
yeah,
we love that. We had so many adoptions during COVID, and so happy that people chose to open their families to a pet
yeah.
during that time. But what we also have seen is, we haven't seen a lot of the narrative around the returns, but we've seen people just really struggling then with behavioral issues because they never introduced their dogs to other dogs. They haven't, suddenly the doorbell's ringing and kids are running into the backyard, and that wasn't happening. So we do get a lot of people asking us, how do I deal with this stranger danger issue? And so what guidance do you have for them?
Yeah, whenever we're treating any behavior concern, it really does come down to first management. So that's avoidance of whatever that trigger is. So, if it is the stranger danger coming to the house, whenever someone comes over, I'm going to put my dog away in another room or crate them so that they can avoid that triggering situation. And so what does that provide? It provides safety, number one. They're not going to attack the HVAC guy, right? It also provides an opportunity for the animal to not feel as stressed, because nobody can learn anything, behavior or otherwise, when you are stressed. And so we're going to reduce that stress level. And then it allows us to actually do the behavior modification that is needed to teach the animal, what do we want you to do instead?
Right.
And that might be through, again, a combination of behavior modification, but potentially medication and products to really reduce stress levels. Better living through chemistry for many of these animals, just like with people.
So let's talk about crating, because I know some people are just like, we've always had a crate for our dog, and it's always just been a wonderful, especially just like the situation where we have a lot of people over, and it's not like that gives them an option of just disengaging and having a break from all the stimulus. So what do you recommend in terms of for people that have never done crate training and how to get started?
Yeah, it really is oftentimes a slow process if they were not, if the dog was not crate trained as a puppy. Puppies are much easier to train just because they're much more receptive at a young age to those new experiences. But if you're working with an adult dog that has never been crate trained, we need to take it slow. We need to associate it with positive things. And that might mean I just leave the crate open and throw some treats around it, so the dog goes and explores and gets those treats. And then once they're comfortable with that, then I'm going to toss the treat inside the crate. So they're going in and willingly doing that. What we don't want to do is just shove them in and close the door and leave them, because that's going to be very panic inducing for any animal. And so it can be a very slow process. And especially if they've have things like actual disorders like separation anxiety, it can be even slower. That's a true panic disorder where no amount of crate training actually is able to make progress. And that's where a certified trainer, applied animal behaviorist, or a veterinary behaviorist needs to step in and help out.
So separation anxiety is another big one that we get, and it really is, people feel very desperate when separation anxiety is bad, and oftentimes we end up with animals because their landlord or neighbors have given them an ultimatum, and it's just impacting
absolutely
other people in a negative way, and also people that are experiencing a lot of property damage and other impacts. So I know that's a really tricky one to deal with. How do you all?
Yeah. So, again, it's kind of that management, behavior modification and medication. And most often, because it is a panic disorder, it does need medication, because you can't train through panic. And so, if the dog is amenable to going to doggy daycare, when you need to leave the house, you can drop them off. There are a lot of people around, especially in the DMV area. We're so lucky that there's tons of people that actually are dog babysitters. They'll come and sit with your dog during the day. They work from home maybe, and they want a companion to sit in their lap, and that's all the dog wants is a lap to sit on, right? So COVID absolutely did none of us favors in terms of that, because our dogs weren't used to us leaving ever. And then unfortunately, many of us had to go back to work in the office recently. So that is very hard. But again, because it is a panic disorder, medication oftentimes is in order to reduce that panic so that we can make progress with it.
Okay, I'm just making sure I'm getting through all my questions here
Yeah.
that we got. It looks like we're having an issue with our chat. For some
Oh,
reason, I'm not seeing Q&A coming through.
Okay.
Catherine, do you know if for some reason the chat's or the Q&A is disabled?
Working.
Oh, it is working. Okay, so I just want to remind anybody, please, if you do have questions as we're moving through, drop it into the Q&A so we can be sure to answer it. So one thing that I think I'd love for you to discuss is just dog body language.
Yeah.
We often see those videos on social media where people are sharing cute videos with a baby, like hugging a dog's head, and nice music is playing, and then of course those of us who work in this field we see like several different things happening that is the dog is really clearly sharing that I'm very uncomfortable with this situation. And so what cues, how do dogs tell you, when they're uncomfortable or sick or fearful?
Yeah. So if they're uncomfortable or fearful, it really is about that nonverbal communication for the most part. Our animals are very nonverbal. I have a colleague that says, don't make your dog raise its voice, because once it raises its voice, it's the last point before a bite actually happens. And so things you can watch for, they might blink rapidly. They might give what's called whale eye, where they're trying to look away and you see a lot of the white of the eye. They'll pin their ears back. They might lick their lips or yawn, and they're not tired. That is a stress yawn. So they're trying to disperse the anxiety. They might look away and like try and, get as small as possible. And those are the signs that say, my dog is uncomfortable. I should stop what I'm doing. Because again, if they have to raise their voice, the next step is a bite, and we don't want that to happen. And so you are absolutely right. On social media, I can barely look at pictures and watch videos because it stresses me out to see how stressed out these animals are. And, people are very lucky that nothing bad is happening. And then the other side of that coin is that I hear all the time the dog bit out of nowhere. Well, the dog's been warning for a very, very long time, trying its best to say, I am uncomfortable here. And we ignored it. And so it wasn't out of nowhere. It needed to escalate because nobody actually listened to it. So there's a great book if anyone is interested in learning about dog body language. It's called Doggy Language. It's illustrated and authored by Lily Chin, who is an amazing illustrator who works a lot in the dog training field. And you can learn so much about, what your animal is feeling, including whether they're ill and not feeling well, just by looking at their body language. So I would highly encourage you pick up that book. It's very, very inexpensive and super easy to read. It's great for kids too. They can understand the illustrations and learn to speak dog.
That's great. And we just got a question here about what resources are available for pet owner. Oh, there's
Bailey.
The handful we've been hearing about.
Yes, you are a handful.
So besides the one you mentioned, do you have any other suggestions of or resources that you found have been really helpful?
Yeah, well, this is a personal plug, but I just recently authored a book with two dog trainers here in the DMV. It's called Dog Parenting. You can order it on Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, any of those sites. And it really is about how to parent your dog and be the best parent you possibly can, whether that be from training or veterinary care, all the way up to, end of life stuff. And so I would really encourage that you pick it up.
That's great. And tell me again what the name of it is.
It's called Dog Parenting, a practical guide. Yeah, a practical guide to understanding your best friend.
That's awesome. So we'll be sure to share that too in the chat.
Fabulous.
To that. And so it's available now?
It's for pre-order. So it should hit the shelves in October.
Okay. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Read. So to talk about a more difficult issue. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about behavioral euthanasia. So,
Yeah.
this is something, unfortunately, that animal shelters around the country deal with almost on a daily basis, and we
Yeah.
often are dealing with families as a last resort. And
Yeah.
so, what do you wish that people better understood about euthanasia and in
Yeah.
terms of an option when you are dealing with behavioral conditions and kind of determining what is treatable and what is not treatable?
Yeah. So, the thing about behavior is there's no cure for it. There is no magic Prozac wand or magic
Right.
training that will make it go away. And so, this is something that the animal is going to have to deal with for the rest of their life, and the family that cares for that animal is going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And that can be really hard. Managing your lifestyle to change completely for a dog that doesn't fit into it can be very difficult. But especially when we're talking about things that, would warrant behavioral euthanasia, ultimately the animal is suffering because they have a high level of fear, anxiety, or stress that they're experiencing with normal living situations. And whether that be my owner has to go to work every single day and I panic being left home alone, or I see dogs because my owner lives in an apartment and they have to walk me just to go to the bathroom, and we see dogs all the time that
Yeah.
scare me, right? And so I always equate it to, if their liver was failing them, we would not hesitate, and treatment wasn't working or treatment was impacting quality of life for the owner or the pet, we would not hesitate to say, all right, I'm going to ease that suffering through euthanasia. And the brain is an organ just like the liver. And so if that brain is suffering and treatment has failed, or again, it's impacting quality of life negatively for either the human and or the pet, we need to consider behavioral euthanasia as a means to end that suffering. And that's really what we're doing with euthanasia. The term literally means translates to good death. And I think it is one of the biggest blessings that we have in veterinary
Mhm.
medicine to be able to do that so that we don't have to watch our beloved companions suffer, because ultimately we're all going to die one way or the other. And, we just don't want them to suffer in those last moments. And that's really, it's a kind of a big soapbox issue for me that we need to think of behavior as they are suffering. And so if they are, then why wouldn't we consider behavioral euthanasia? No veterinarian goes into veterinary medicine to euthanize animals. But like I said, we do, for the most part, I think all of us do consider it a blessing that we have that opportunity and option should we need it.
Yeah, thank you for that
Mhm.
explanation. And I think likewise, none of us go into animal
Yeah,
welfare to have
absolutely.
to make those hard decisions around euthanasia. And we are extremely fortunate in Fairfax
Yeah.
County Animal Services is that we have a behavior and training team, and so
Yeah.
we do we have a wonderful veterinary team. So
Yeah.
we are able to utilize what we call kennel meds, right?
Yeah.
To
Yes.
just help dogs. The
Absolutely.
kennel environment can be really stressful, and
Absolutely.
our behavior team does an amazing job really looking at what is the root cause of these behavior things and putting forward a treatment plan. And oftentimes we can get animals into a stable place in the
Mhm.
shelter because we everything is the same in the shelter, right? You're
Right.
eating the same time every
Yes.
day. Our cleaning happens the same time every day. You go to the same place
Yep.
outside, and so it's a very structured, stable
Yep.
environment. And then where we see sometimes the breakdown happen is the animals in this new home,
Yep.
and it's suddenly the door, you know, kind of what we have built is not there for them anymore,
No,
and
absolutely.
things
Yeah. And
happen.
yeah, we all thrive off structure and predictability as
Yeah.
much as we possibly can. And yeah, home, I mean, poor little Bailey here, our home is chaos. I have two kids, three other
Yes.
dogs, chickens, like it is absolute chaos. And so the fact that he came from a family with, two elderly parents who literally were home all day for him, it's been a little bit of a struggle for him to adjust. But we try and keep it as structured and predictable as possible for him to make that transition a lot easier.
But we do have high expectations that we put on dogs, right? We
Absolutely.
when they go into homes, we need them to be flexible and to give lots of cues
Yeah.
and even to walk away to a situation versus so
Yeah.
it is. I feel like sometimes we're expecting the impossible of
Yeah.
dogs, and we're always amazed by their goodness and their
Yeah.
patience.
Yeah.
With dealing with novel situations and
Yeah.
working through fear. I always think there's actually a lot we can learn from them,
I would agree. I would
and
agree.
and and they're so inspiring. And so
Yeah.
that kind of brings me to my next question is, we often get dogs who have experienced neglect or abuse or
Hmm.
are not getting the foundation that they need.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, how do dogs carry that trauma with them, and how
Yeah.
does that or those previous experience affect their behavior, and what can we do for them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, everybody carries their trauma with them. The thing that is all about that one individual is how much of that does that impact the rest of their life. And some individuals are incredibly resilient. One of my previous dogs was shot by a BB gun, and
Mm,
she never showed any sort of signs of trauma when she came to us. She loved everybody. She loved every other dog. Like she had a lot of resilience and was able to overcome that.
yeah,
Just like some people, they have
yeah.
very traumatizing childhoods and they're able to be successful, emotionally stable human beings as adults. But some animals don't possess that resiliency. And so those are the ones that are going to carry that to whatever degree it is through the rest of their life. And especially with, animals that were neglected, I would say probably less likely with abuse is the lack of socialization. So
Yes.
socialization is a window that literally closes at 16 weeks of age for dogs. And what they were exposed to before that is what they find normal and they're okay with. And what they were not exposed to, they're going to find very scary later on. And so I hear, from clients all the time that, oh, my dog must have been abused by a man with a broom because they're scared of men and carrying brooms. And I'm like, there aren't a lot of men, thankfully, running around with brooms beating dogs, right? It's like one of the most common things that I hear from clients is the man with the broom. So it was because they didn't ever see those in those
Yeah.
16 weeks, right? Like they
Hmm.
were living on a farm, in a barn, in an Amish breeding facility, right? And they never saw adults. They saw children that fed them, et cetera. And they never experienced living in a household where you vacuum, where you
Yeah.
sweep things, where you wear sunglasses and hats and all that kind of stuff. And so that really actually I think is more traumatizing is when we don't have that exposure and appropriate socialization before 4 months of age is gone.
So there's been a lot in obviously in human emotional
Hmm.
and mental development to talk about the importance of the first 3 years. And
Hmm.
as a mother, it's really
Right.
reinforced with you how you should be meeting those milestones and
Yeah.
the things you should be working to achieve in the first 3 years of a child's life. So
Yeah.
what recommendations do you have for dogs? What should they be
Yeah.
exposed to, and how to set them up for success?
Yeah, so they really should be exposed to as many stimuli, whether that be new people, new places, new sounds, new sights, new smells, per every single day that you possibly can do. Making sure that they are comfortable in those situations too. So if they're too scared in those situations, you're flooding them. You're actually making things worse versus better.
Mhm. Okay.
But most puppies are very exploratory during that socialization window. And so attending a puppy socialization class, we have one at our practice where we teach puppies, all of these things are not so scary and try to expose them to kids and other dogs. And we have clinic cats that we expose them to, and sights and sounds and Halloween costumes and that kind of thing. And so it's really important to enroll in an appropriate socialization class before that 16-week window really closes. And then let's say you adopt the dog older than 16 weeks, then it is really about controlled exposure to the level that the pet is able to tolerate it. And so, again, if my dog is scared, I'm not going to drag them over to the fire hydrant and say, you're fine, everything's fine here, because that's flooding and that's really
Right.
inhumane. And so seeking the guidance of a professional trainer, a positive reinforcement professional trainer, can really help in those situations as well.
Great. And we also at the shelter, if anybody does need a list of positive reinforcement trainers, we do have that. So anybody who, here and looking for that, please do reach out to us so we can provide that, because it is hard to also, it's a whole different world, right? You're just a new dog mom and trying to figure out, how do you do that, and how do you socialize your pets? But I even know that there's very affordable classes through rec centers and other options that aren't going to break the bank, but just offer that foundation and socialization. So important.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the older dog. So not everybody gets a puppy. Some people come to us and they end up with a senior dog or middle-aged dog, and they're trying to go about we integrating that dog into their family. And so one thing that we did was we started a new program called Adoption Audition, and because we recognized most people that were coming to adopt from us already had at least one pet in their home. And so it just felt really overwhelming for them to just meet an animal and have this short interaction in a very weird kind of scary setting like a shelter, and then make that decision. And they want to make this lifetime commitment. So Adoption Audition is a 5-day, it's like a 5-day, no strings attached. Like you walk out with the animal and you just have that 5 days to see how that animal does. So you don't feel the need to accelerate those introductions. So what guidance would you give to people on how to make those first few days really successful in integrating them in your household?
Yeah. So for dogs, it's really important to make sure that we manage resources. So, a single dog in a household might be totally fine with people coming up to its food bowl, but another dog is a whole other story. And so feeding them separate, making sure that we, do appropriate introductions, which oftentimes means parallel walks where we take them for walks, down the road. We're all going in the same direction. And that could even be as from a distance of one's on one sidewalk, one's on the other, right? And we've got the street in between. Always monitoring that body language. So, the body language is going to tell us how comfortable are these animals together. And then making sure that if, your resident dog or the new dog is not fully comfortable, that we have a way that we can separate them. And whether that be through baby gates, crating, doing what we call crate and rotate, or just even closed doors, can really help to minimize each of those dogs' stress levels. So that we can go about it slowly. And there are, some that it can take weeks, but after 5 days, I think that program is amazing, because you're right. It's like a no strings attached, because people, I get it. When you get a dog, you're like, I want to keep this dog forever. I love them, but ultimately they have to fit into your household and your lifestyle. And knowing that you can, without judgment, return them back to the shelter for someone else to, to adopt. I think that is fantastic that you guys do that.
Well, it has truly been just a game-changing program for us, especially for our larger, more rowdy dogs that sometimes their kennel presentation isn't that appealing. And we're like, we promise they're actually awesome once you get them out of the kennel and out of the shelter. They're a couch potato, and just try it. And so it really has been great. And we are, we piloted it with dogs, with some of our longer stay dogs, and it just seeing so many dogs go to homes because of it. And then we realized, let's just do it for cats. Let's do it for rabbits. And it just has been, the community has been so positive in their
Good.
response to that. And we
Good.
also are really flexible with it. If people call and say, you know what, I need an additional like 5 days,
Oh,
to
nice. Good.
really see. And because we also know like animals have a decompression period,
Mm-hmm.
and they,
Yep.
being in a shelter, being in a home, and then being in a shelter, and then being in a brand new home,
Mm-hmm.
that is a lot. And
Yeah.
so
Yep.
they may not be themselves, and they may not be their best self with all that
Absolutely.
transition. So
Absolutely.
it does that just extra grace period has been
Yeah.
really important for us. So
That's fantastic. Thank you for doing that.
and so sometimes you have people leave the shelter and they are just so excited about their new pet that,
Mm-hmm.
and we understand that and we love that enthusiasm, but they are like, their first stop will be like Petco and their second stop is the
Right.
dog park. And so we
Right.
always try
Right.
to like talk through that, like,
Right.
this is a lot. The dog
Yeah.
has been like living in this kennel, seeing the same people,
Right.
in a very structured environment. So like go slow.
Yeah.
Any other words of wisdom we provide to people in those first hours or first
Yeah.
days to set them up for
Yeah.
success?
As much as possible, keep that dog's world as small as possible, at
Yeah.
least for the first 72 hours. I'm sure you guys know the 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months
Yes.
rule of like it does take about 3 days to really decompress from whatever situation you were in before. And then 3 weeks to kind of really settle into the new place, but 3 months fully to show true behavior. And so there is oftentimes a honeymoon period with these pets. And sometimes it's like you adopt this dog thinking they are great with other dogs. And 3 months down the
Yes.
road, when they're finally feeling comfortable, finally able
Mhm.
to show their true behavior, then they're reactive to other dogs. And so it's not that you have done anything wrong. It's just that sometimes how long, they will honeymoon. Just like if you start a new job, you are not necessarily going to be your true self on those first 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months,
Right.
potentially until you feel comfortable enough to kind of show your true colors, essentially. So just take it slow and know that, there is help out there if you need it, to really help that transition process. And again, whether that be one of those, positive reinforcement trainers, a veterinary behaviorist, or a PhD applied animal behaviorist, that's what we're here for, is to hopefully keep these pets in your home. And so, yeah, just utilize those resources.
So we had another question about
Mhm.
video resources. And then so I
Yeah.
know if you Google like dog behavior training.
Mhm. Oh, Reasa, can you hear me?
Are
You
you?
froze. Oh, you
Oh, I
froze. Am
did.
I okay?
Oh, okay. You're
Okay.
fine. Yes, yes.
Okay.
It's probably Catherine freezing me. She's like, you've talked enough now. So, so, so we often have people ask us about video
Hmm.
recommendations for
Yeah.
training techniques. And I know if you do a Google search, you can get everything from like Caesar Milan to,
Yeah.
utilizing shock collars and everything
Yeah.
under the sun. So
Yeah.
do you have recommendations or like video libraries that
Yeah.
you refer clients to?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a resource in the DMV called Your Dog's Friend. They are not nonprofit organization that really focuses on getting positive reinforcement education out to everybody. And they have webinars, videos,
Great.
how-tos. They have free classes you can even take. They're phenomenal. So look up Your Dog's Friend, and they are in, I believe, Rockville area of
Great.
Maryland, and they're wonderful. A wealth of resources there for everybody.
Okay, your dog's friend.
Mhm.
That's a great resource. 'Cause I know a lot of folks do turn to the internet just, with
Of
if
course.
there's financial restrictions or whatever
Yeah.
else. And then for folks that maybe have an interest in dog behavior and want to go down that path
Yeah.
towards learning more or towards a certification or getting involved in this industry,
Yeah.
what would you recommend for them?
Yeah, so many of our local training groups, WOOFs, Forget Me Not, Board Hound. I'm trying to think who else in Alexandria. Holistic Hound. They have apprenticeship programs for budding trainers. And so if you are at all interested, contact people. We can't take shadows only because of our liability, because we deal with mostly aggressive patients. And so we really try and limit it to just veterinary technicians and veterinary students. So we get veterinary students that rotate through as part of their fourth-year curriculum from Virginia Tech and other universities. But, reach out, cold call people, like do what I did. That's exactly how I got my residency, is I cold called my mentor, Dr. Deborah Horowitz, and said, hey, I want to do this. And she was like, all right, let's do this. And so we're all very open and want to get the education out. And if you show interest, I'm sure that there will be lots of people clamoring to have you.
That's great. That's a wonderful suggestion. And thank you, Dr. Pike, for just being here, but also everything that you do for our shelter. We refer a lot of our community members to you, and I know you've helped provide guidance on some situations where we have felt like we were struggling with a treatment plan or the way forward with pets, and just to have you as that additional expert and that feedback, and we also appreciate your staff coming to present to us so that we can continue to grow in our knowledge, because it's an industry, and I think that people, it's the specialization and the science and the studying. We've worked with Dr. Lisa Gunter out of Virginia Tech, and it's just, I think this is a really exciting time in this field and a very hopeful time. And so we are always looking to learn and grow what we can do in the shelter, and also how we can better support animals in our community, because what we've seen in surrender reasons is behavior is one of the top ones consistently, and people just, by the time they get to us, they're just really frustrated and kind of out of options. So we're just excited to continue to have proactive resources for people to help keep those pets with their families where they belong. So
absolutely. I always say, like, I don't want to be a last resort. I oftentimes am a last resort. And so at the first sign of behavior issues, reach out to somebody, because we don't grow out of our anxiety, we grow into it. And so it's only going to get worse with time. And the sooner we intervene, the better, because the more an animal practices a behavior, the better they get at it. So we have a much higher success rate with those who seek intervention early.
Okay. Yes, I think the earlier the better, as with everyone. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure we got to the questions.
Sure.
I think that we got to everything. So, well, again, Dr. Pike, thank you, and thank you to your team as well. And we will, in addition to sending out this video, we will also send out a list of the resources that we shared.
Fantastic. Thanks, Reasa, for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.